It's a little bit too cold still to be dressed quite like this, but you know, in honor of the fact that I want to talk about architecture, I decided to wear my carpenter's clothes. Let's see, but before I go on with that, a little romance. Back when I was teaching French, I forgot to mention that, there was a very cute movie called A Little Romance. And on YouTube, the trailer's there. I couldn't find quickly the part that I used. I liked to show my students just a little bit of it, because there's an example of an American girl who speaks terrible French. And she says something like, "Je suis l'ami de..." whatever, I don't know. It's terrible French, and the actress is so cute the way she delivers this bad French. It's a cute movie. Sir Laurence Olivier is in it. I recommend it. All right, we're in the medieval period. That's the fourth period. This is the chronological survey. In your notes, it would be the 18th section. I dealt a little bit with history. I dealt a little bit with characteristics, and now I'm into classics. I most recently talked about the classic that we have, those legends of Robin Hood. Well, we also the humanities is certainly not only literature; it's architecture as well. And from the Middle Ages, we have in Europe castles and Gothic cathedrals that we still highly value. The castles, I'm not going to say too much about them because I think they, in a way, they take care of themselves. I think kids from an early point are fascinated with castles. They're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But what I want to talk a little bit more about, though, is these Gothic cathedrals. The Gothic cathedrals are just amazing. As far as I'm concerned, of all the large architecture that I know, it's my favorite. I prefer Gothic cathedrals to what I know of the pyramids, what the Romans built. They're just wonderful. And you can see a Gothic cathedral in the United States. I think there's about 3 of them. There's one in Washington, and that's probably the last one that will ever be built. There's 2 in New York, St. Patrick's and St. John's. The one in Washington is called the Washington Cathedral. But anyway, to see the really great ones, you've got to go to Europe, especially France. And an example of a Gothic cathedral would be Notre Dame de Paris, Notre Dame Cathedral. It's right in the center of Paris. If you go to Paris, you see the Eiffel Tower, you see Notre Dame. That's where the Hunchback of Notre Dame is set there. Well, what makes them so wonderful? I'm going to direct you where you can go online to see. I'll tell you about it some. I might even try to draw a little bit. The Gothic cathedrals were staggeringly high, and they were built almost 1,000 years ago. Some of them took 80 years to build. It would be the monumental work of a fairly small city. We couldn't build them now. We just couldn't do it. They didn't use steel. It was all stone on stone. It wasn't being held together by steel. And these high Gothic cathedrals, it was a new kind of construction, probably because the Arabs gave the Western Europe the pointed arches that they could do it. And now you could build something very high, and the walls didn't have to be really thick. So you could fill them with glass. So they were full of stained glass windows. Just wonderful. And at the top, there was stone vaulting. So that when you go in these and you look up, you're looking at a ceiling, but it's stone. And it weighs a lot. Well, all that weight wants to push down and push that building apart. And so what they did, what they figured out they could do is they could thicken the walls at certain points to take the thrust. That's called thrust. When like a rafter does it, a rafter pushes down, but it pushes out as well. Well, to absorb that thrust, they'd make a thicker spot in the wall. So I will try to draw it. Let's say you've got a pointed arch like that, and it wants to push out. So when it comes down to the wall here, I can't draw, but for this I'll do it anyway. They would thicken. It wants to push out, and so they would go higher here. Oops, to give it more weight. They would go higher, and they would go thicker. They would go thicker as well to keep those single spots where the ribs, they were called, were pushing out stone, hugely heavy. And they could keep making it thicker, but they also figured out that they could make another pillar out here and then use an arch like that, almost like leaning a post against a building that's going to push out. They even would come out and do another one. Well, in that these, it's too cold, I can't draw anyway, but these things are called flying buttresses. And you know, how they build them is, you can understand it, but not based on my drawing. But if you would go to David Macaulay, he wrote books, wonderful books on cathedrals and castles both, and they were made into videos. I'm always working with YouTube because that's the easiest for you. David Macaulay, if you would search that Gothic Cathedral, and the channel that put the one on I just looked at is INT, probably International School History, INT School History. There you'll see the first episode. But the part that I like to show my students was the part where it actually showed the lifting of the stones and the setting of the stones in these vaults. If you've got an arch, that's like that. But if you've got a series of arches beside each other that are covering an area, now you've got what's called a vault. And it would be tempting for me to try to explain more about it, but in this venue I really can't. The other spot I would recommend that you go to is building the great cathedrals, the squirrel cage. See, once you go there, if you'll use YouTube, once you go there and you just start clicking on the stuff, you can educate yourself. It'll be self-explanatory. Well, they're wonderful. I should certainly mention the royal wedding. That was in a Gothic cathedral, Westminster Abbey. They're in England as well, but the biggest and the most famous of them really are in France. But that's the one that probably most people would think of. Oh yeah, I remember where the royal wedding was. Well, that is a very wonderful, wonderful Gothic cathedral. All right, have another couple videos today.